Okay, so let's first of all think about the motivation behind what are variables are for. So the program we just looked at, Hello World, is very boring. It only ever does one thing. It prints the words Hello World. And really for programs, almost every program needs to respond to user input of some kind. So if you think about a cash machine, that's very simple. It just responds to some button presses and the card being put in. Video game, obviously much more complicated. All of our programs need to respond in some way. And one way of doing that is to get the user to type something in. And we just saw if I hit return, I can then change the output of the program. Change the output, I can get it to do something. But there's other ways to receive input from, you can also get input from other devices such as the mouse or touchscreens or game consoles or headsets. There's lots and lots of different ways of doing that now. Okay, we're not going to cover them in this course. We're just going to cover some basic input, and we'll see that essentially either putting in text or using a graphical user interface to input some information into the program a bit later on in the course. Okay, so this second program is called HelloName, and this one it asks the user what their name is and then prints out hello plus whatever that name is. Okay, let's just demonstrate that. So it says, what's your name? I put in the word Chris, and it says, hello, Chris. So it's whatever the user types in. And if you put in a word like, or two words even, Michelle Obama, it'll type those out as well. Okay, so it's just whatever the user types in, which means that it doesn't even need to be a single word, right? And the way it does this is that the program has to temporarily store a copy of what the user's typed in. So think about what we saw just then when I ran it. I typed something in. The program's got to process that and do something with it. In this case, it just puts the word hello in front of it, but it could be something much more complicated. And the way it's storing that information is in a thing called a variable. Okay, it's called a variable because it can vary as the program runs. And it's like a bit of storage inside the program. Okay, so think of it like a box in which some data is stored. When the program was written, okay, let's look at the program. Let's open it up in idle. There's the program. I don't know that the user is going to type in Chris or anything else. It could be whatever the user types in. It doesn't even have to be a real word, right? It could just be just bash some keys on the keyboard and it says hello plus whatever the user's typed on the keyboard. So I don't know what the user is going to type, but I do know that the user is going to type something and I need to store it. So when the program is written, as a programmer, I don't know what will be stored in that box. I just need to know that I've got somewhere to store that information. So we store that information in what's called a variable. In this case, it's called name because suggestively it's telling us what's stored there. It's what we're expecting the user to have typed in when we ask them what their name is. And then that information that's stored in that variable in name is then used to construct the output. Okay, so there's our program again. Here's on this line, we ask the user what their name is, and then we take whatever that is and store it in the variable called name. And then in this line, we print out the string hello plus whatever they've typed in. Okay. So first of all, how do we tell Python that we need one of these variable things? Well, unlike other languages, we don't need to declare that name is a variable. So if you're used to using other languages like, I don't know, Java or JavaScript, in Java you might use a string variable. In JavaScript you might just say var. We don't need to do that in Python. Python is a bit simpler in that respect, or easier, less complex. That's a good thing. We just start to use it. So we create this thing called name, and then we start to use it. Python will figure out what we're trying to do. We also, again, if you've done any programming, you might be used to saying what kind of thing a variable is going to store. We don't need to do that in Python. Okay, we just if you're using something like Java, you might say it's a string or it's an integer. We don't need to do that. We'll just create this thing called name, and that stores some information. So in other languages, as I say, it can be a little bit more complicated. As I mentioned at the introduction to this course, this is all about learning the ideas behind programming. And in other languages, it's a little bit more involved, because you usually have to say what you're going to store and that you're going to use something like that. So you have to tell the language that this is going to happen. In Python, you just start using a variable called name, and it will store whatever information you want to put in it. Okay. So I'm going to stop this video here. That gives you a sense of how we use our first variable, and then the next up we're going to talk about how we assign variables, what this equal sign means.